The pen shook in Verlene Kessler's hand, and she hated that it did, because everyone in that cramped office at the Belhaven County Courthouse could see it. The paper in front of her wasn't a marriage license. Not really. It was a rope, thrown down into a well she'd been drowning in for 11 months, and she was about to grab it with both hands, even though she didn't know who was holding the other end. Thaddeus Corliss sat beside her, close enough that she could smell cedar and machine oil on his jacket. A man she had met exactly 4 times in her life, and was now agreeing to marry. "You don't have to smile," he said quietly, not looking at her. "Just sign your name the way you always do." She didn't ask him how he knew the way she always signed her name. There wasn't time to ask him anything anymore. 3 days earlier, a man from Prairie Union Bank had walked onto her father's land wearing a tie too clean for a Tuesday, and he'd told Otis Kessler, 68 years old, lungs half gone from 40 years of grain dust, that the farm would be auctioned on the courthouse steps in 21 days, unless someone produced $51,000. The Kessler family did not have. Verlene had sold what could be sold. She'd pawned her mother's wedding ring, the one thing of Faye Kessler's that had survived the fire that took her, and it had bought them exactly 11 days of borrowed time and a check for $4,000 that didn't touch the surface of what they owed. And then Thaddeus Corliss had shown up at the diner where she worked doubles, sliding into the booth across from her, like he'd been sent by something crueler than luck, and made her an offer that sounded, at first, like the setup to a joke nobody was going to laugh at. Marry him for 1 year, in front of witnesses, in front of the county, in front of God, if God was still paying attention to Belhaven, Nebraska. In exchange, the Kessler debt would vanish, paid in full, no strings anyone could see. Why, she'd asked him, and her voice had come out flatter than she meant it to. Would you do that for a woman you don't know? He hadn't answered the question. He just set a folded paper on the table, the payoff terms from the bank already drawn up in his name, and said, "You have until Thursday." She had gone home that night and told her father nothing, because Otis Kessler was a proud man, dying slowly in a house he built with his own hands, and she was terrified that if she told him a stranger was offering to erase everything, he would refuse out of pride and let the auction take the last thing that was theirs. So she said yes, and now here she was, in a courthouse office that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, marrying a man whose middle name she didn't even know, watching her own signature bleed across the line like it belonged to someone braver than her. The clerk, a woman named Ottilie Marsh, who'd known Verlene since grade school, didn't ask questions, though her eyes lingered a beat too long on the space where a bouquet should have been. Nobody clapped, nobody cried. Thaddeus Corliss shook Verlene's hand like they just closed a business deal, because that was exactly what they had done. And then he handed her a folded check, made out to Prairie Union Bank for $51,000, and he said the only tender thing he would say to her for the next 6 weeks: "Your father doesn't have to know how." She went home a married woman, and told her father she'd taken out a private loan through a man she'd met at church. Otis believed her because he wanted to, because relief has a way of making people stop asking the second question. Thaddeus Corliss moved into the small house on Route 9 that the Corliss family owned on the edge of town, and Verlene moved in with him because the terms required they live as a married couple. Convincingly, for the county and for whoever might be watching. She never asked who might be watching. She had a feeling she already didn't want to know. The first weeks were quiet, in a way, that scraped at her nerves worse than shouting would have. Thaddeus left before sunrise to work the equipment yard he managed outside of town and came home after dark, smelling like diesel and dust, and he was unfailingly, maddeningly polite. He fixed the dripping faucet in the kitchen without being asked. He left the porch light on for her when she worked the late shift at the diner. He never once looked at her the way men in Belhaven sometimes did, like she was something to be commented on, and somehow that restraint unsettled her more than attention would have. It was the third week when she found the letter. She hadn't been looking for it. She'd been searching the hall closet for a spare quilt during a cold snap, and a showbox had come down off the shelf, spilling old photographs and a single envelope, yellowed at the corners, addressed in handwriting she didn't recognize to a woman named Adeline Corliss. She knew that name. Everyone in Belhaven knew that name. Adeline Corliss had run the Corliss Trust for 40 years before her health failed, and it was common knowledge, the kind passed around at the feed store and the beauty parlor, that the Corliss Trust had quietly bought up half the debt paper in the county, including, Verlene now realized, with a cold drop in her stomach, likely her own father's mortgage before the bank ever came calling. She didn't open the letter. She put it back exactly where she found it, hands trembling for a different reason now, and she said nothing to Thaddeus that night, though she watched him across the dinner table with new and sharper eyes. It was 2 weeks after that when Adeline Corliss requested, through a lawyer named Bertram Ashby, that the newly married couple come for Sunday dinner at the Corliss estate on the hill above town. The first and only invitation Verlene would ever receive there. Adeline Corliss was smaller than Verlene expected, folded into a wheelchair by the window, oxygen tubing looped over ears that still were her late husband's pearl earrings. Her eyes, though, were not small at all. They moved over Verlene with an intensity that made the girl feel as if she were being appraised for a debt of her own. "So," Adeline said, before anyone had even sat down, "you're Otis Kessler's daughter?" "Yes, ma'am." "You favor your mother." "I only met her the once." A pause, longer than it needed to be. "She was kind to me at a time I didn't deserve it." Verlene looked at Thaddeus, but his jaw was set, his eyes fixed somewhere past his grandmother's shoulder, and she understood in that moment that whatever was about to be said, he already knew it, and had known it the whole time. Adeline Corliss told the story slowly, the way people do when they've rehearsed it in their heads for years and are finally letting it out into the air. 31 years ago, when Otis Kessler was a young man trying to expand his father's grain operation, he had partnered with a Corliss cousin on a land deal that went bad. Not through Otis's fault, but through a deliberate undercutting engineered by the Corliss family to acquire the parcel themselves. Otis had lost nearly everything that year. He had rebuilt, slower and smaller, and he had never known who was truly behind it. "I was the one who signed the papers," Adeline said. "I was young, and I was told it was simply business, and I told myself the same thing for 30 years. Verlene's hands had gone cold in her lap. "And the debt on our farm now, was that you too?" "The bank note was legitimate," Adeline said, "but when I learned, this spring, that Otis Kessler's daughter was about to lose the last of what I helped take from him, I could not let history repeat itself. While I still had breath to stop it, I asked my grandson to find a way to help without wounding your father's pride. Thaddeus chose the way himself." The room was silent except for the hiss of the oxygen machine. "So it wasn't real," Verlene said, and her voice cracked on the word real in a way she despised. "None of it. I wasn't married. I was collected, like a debt you needed to settle before you died." "Verlene." Thaddeus reached for her hand, and she pulled it back so fast the water glass beside her tipped, spreading a dark stain across Adeline Corliss's white tablecloth, like something bleeding out. "Don't," she said. "Don't call me that like you know me. You knew who I was before I ever sat down across from you in that diner. You knew my father's name. You knew my mother's ring was gone. Before I told you, this whole time, I was the one keeping a secret from him. And it turns out I was the secret." She left the Corliss estate on foot, in the cold, and walked the 4 miles back to Route 9 alone. And when Thaddeus's truck slowed beside her on the shoulder, she didn't get in. She stayed with her father that night and told him everything. All of it. The loan. That wasn't a loan. The marriage. That wasn't a marriage. The Corliss name stitched invisibly through every hardship her family had ever survived. She braced for him to break. Instead, Otis Kessler sat very still at the kitchen table for a long time, and then he said something she hadn't expected. "I always wondered how we lost that land so clean. A man builds a whole grudge around a mystery like that if he lets himself He looked at his daughter, and his eyes were wet, but steady. Doesn't sound to me like that boy owes you an apology for something his grandmother did before he was born. Sounds to me like he spent his whole savings trying to fix it. Quiet. So it wouldn't cost you your pride the way it near cost me mine. He should have told me. He should have, Otis agreed. That's a fair thing to be angry about. But don't go confusing the sin with the man who's been paying for it. She didn't go back to Route 9 for 11 days. She heard, through the small, merciless machinery of small-town gossip, that Thaddeus had gone to the bank himself and torn up the private arrangement. Papers that would have quietly folded the Kessler property into the Corliss Trust's holdings once the year of marriage concluded, an arrangement she hadn't even known existed until Ottilie Marsh let it slip at the grocery store, looking immediately sorry that she had. She hadn't known there was a version of this where he stood to gain the farm itself. She drove out to the equipment yard on a Thursday evening, the sky over Belhaven doing that low, bruised orange thing it does before a storm, and she found him alone, wrench in hand, halfway under a tractor that didn't need him there so late. I tore up the trust arrangement, he said, before she could speak, sliding out from under the machine, grease across his forearm. I want you to hear that from me, and not from Ottilie's cousin at the feed store. I never wanted the land. I wanted my grandmother to die easy. And somewhere in the middle of doing that, I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in that kitchen, complaining about the faucet I already fixed. You should have told me the truth from the start. I know it. He didn't look away from her, didn't soften it, didn't ask for forgiveness he hadn't earned. Yet, I told myself I was protecting your father's pride. Some of that was true. The rest of it was that I was a coward. Because I was already half in love with you by the second week, and I was afraid the truth would end it before it had the chance to become real. Adeline Corliss died 19 days later in early spring, with the last of the frost still silvering the fields, and in her will she left the entirety of the disputed land parcel, along with a written apology, addressed not to Thaddeus, but to Otis Kessler by name. Back to the Kessler family outright. No conditions, no marriage required. Verlene stood at the reading of that will beside a man she had married for the wrong reasons and was now choosing, deliberately, wide awake, for the right ones. When the lawyer finished speaking, Thaddeus turned to her in the quiet room and said the vows had already been said once, on paper, for the county to see, but he wanted to say them again, for real this time, with no debt standing behind them and no grandmother's guilt writing the script. They were married a second time that autumn, on the reclaimed Kessler land, under the same sky that had watched the whole crooked history unfold 30 years before it ever touched either of them. Otis Kessler walked his daughter the short distance from the porch to where Thaddeus stood waiting, and when he placed her hand in his, he leaned in and said, low enough for only the two of them to hear, that some debts take a lifetime to come due, but every so often, if you're patient enough to let the truth finish arriving, they come back around as something worth keeping instead of something to fear. The wind moved through the wheat that hadn't been planted yet, and Verlene Kessler, who had once signed her name on a courthouse form with a shaking hand and a stranger beside her, signed it again, that day with a hand that didn't shake at all, because this time, finally, every word above it was true.
Some stories start with the lie and somehow still end with the truth. This one was not just about saving a family, it was about finding out that real love does not ask to be earned. It just shows up, quick and stubborn, until you cannot ignore it anymore. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and I will see you in the next story.